Shabbat Shalom. The rabbis say there are 10 songs. The Song of the Sea, the Song of Deborah, there's songs in the Psalms, the Song of David, of Solomon, but there is one that has yet to be sung. It's going to happen in the future, they tell us, in the world to come. And we will sing it without shame and without embarrassment and without any self-consciousness, just a full-throated song. But I wonder, on this Shabbat Yitro, I wonder if this song already exists right here in the hearts of all of us here tonight. And I wonder if this song might be sung not in the next world, but now. There are many deep and mysterious stories about what happened when we received Torah, when God and all that is holy and ineffable reached across dimensions of time and space and worlds to offer us the possibility of holiness and justice and truth. Surely something happened on the exterior. We read about fire and voices and thunder, an experience we could not help but leave changed, an experience that imprinted us. But also, I learned this week from my teacher, Aviva Zornberg, sometime in that event, something also happened very much, not just outside of us, but in us. I don't want to say something in us was moved, although that is surely true. But I don't want to say this Shabbat that we were moved, because it implies we were fundamentally altered by the experience. And although it's true, I don't want to say something was kindled, because that implies some kind of physical, biological transformation. Something was illuminated, empowered. And although you could surely suggest it, it is surely true. This Shabbat, I don't even want to say something in us was born, because that implies a transformation took place, an evolution, that we were somehow different before and after. It's true. All those things are true, but this Shabbat, I want to say, in addition to whatever happened on the outside, in addition to whatever changes invariably took place from all that happened on this Shabbat, when God offered us the Torah, at that moment, we also experienced a moment of recognition. We recognized that all God was offering us was already, unmistakably, irreducibly in us. Now we could feel the contours and identify it as obvious as the mountain in front of us, undeniable as the fires in the skies, incontrovertible as the fact that we were surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people. There was a shock and shudder of recognition that what God was offering was already in our hearts. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not in heaven. It's also in us. Whatever it is that animates Torah and gives us life, we experienced it for the first time, not only from above, but in ourselves. The Sfat Emet, our Hasidic teacher, puts it this way. When Torah is telling the story of what happened at Sinai, it says mysteriously, V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot. All the people saw the voices. What does it mean, he asks? What does it mean to see voices? He says what the verse means specifically. First, when we heard God's voice, when we heard God's first words, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. Here God speaks in the singular. God said, I am the Lord your God, each one, not collectively, not all of you together. I am yours and yours and yours and yours. So in that moment, each person felt the divine voice was coming from right inside him, her, them. Not only that, the fact that Torah says we saw the voices means that our experience of this voice coming from a deep place inside each of us, this seeing, it wasn't something to be demonstrated or proven. You didn't even have to believe it. It just was. It wasn't even necessary to say anything out loud. It was just self-evident. The voice is coming from within me. There is a fragment of a divine song in me, and each one knew it. Each one felt it. No alchemy had to take place. Vayihi, and it was so. It was just so. We saw we had always been this way. We were created to be just this way. That's how it is when you talk to God, said the Sfat Emet. And I imagine hearing that voice inside was like finding a long-lost relative. Only we were realizing, still trying to shake off slavery, we had been the lost ones. There are many stories I heard after high holidays this year that moved me a great deal, especially because we could not see or experience for ourselves all that was going on in your homes. So hearing these stories took on a new significance for us. One family told me that on Kol Nidre, they got all dressed up in white and they were feeling a bit self-conscious. It was all so strange. They turned on their computers and stood near their porch to pray. But as they neared their window, they heard something across the park where they lived. They heard Kol Nidre, and they looked out, and across the park, they saw a man, someone they had never met, someone they did not know, also dressed in white, standing on his porch, his window also open, and he was praying the same prayers and witnessing our same service. He too was reaching out and trying to sing. And the story reminds us, even now, divine voices, our divine voices still reach out, still reach to find other divine voices. It doesn't matter if we never met. It doesn't matter if we ever meet. It doesn't matter if we're in the same space or time zone. The voices of our souls call across gardens and oceans, from Sinai to now, across generations, unmistakably, just as sure as our hearts beat in our chests. In the past few weeks, archaeologists in Israel found 3 scraps of cloth from 1000 BCE from the time of King David. And what's remarkable about this cloth, see, besides the fact that it's like 3,000 years old, is that it is dyed a vibrant purple. A purple that's referred to in Torah, a purple that's associated with royalty and the priesthood, a purple that is made from sea snails. The same snails with a slightly different process that make techelet, the special blue that Torah tells us to use for the fringes of our talitot, for our tzitzit. But the other thing that's remarkable about this purple cloth is that until now, many archaeologists thought that the place where they found this precious and royal purple deep in the desert, they thought that place was only the site of a simple nomadic tribe. But when they found the cloth sea, it indicated a willingness and a capacity to travel many miles to the nearest seashore to try to obtain the purple, as well as the ability and the desire to manufacture and transmit this purple to the remote place. Finding this royal purple, this argamon, meant that all the theories about that place deep in the desert had to be changed. It meant that everything they thought we understood about the tribe had to be re-understood and reorganized in light of that one color. The rabbis say Yitro too needed to do some reorganizing of the way he thought of things. Remember Yitro, in one of my favorite moments of Torah, although I do say that about a lot of moments, Yitro, who is not part of Israel, and in fact, as the rabbis would have it, is maybe even a very statusy type of courtier for the Pharaoh. He has a lot to lose, if you know what I mean. Yitro comes out into the middle of nowhere, far into the middle of the desert. Why he does is up for great debate. Seems like he heard something that changed his life. Something that makes all his honors and achievements pale in comparison. Maybe it was the miracle of the splitting of the sea. Maybe it was another story. We don't know. Regardless, he arrives. And as my teacher, Aviva Zornberg, showed us, after Moses tells him the full story, the full rundown of everything that had happened to us, the splitting of the sea, all of the miracles, the text says, Vayichad Yitro. Simply, and Yitro rejoiced over all that had happened for Israel. But Rashi says the verb can also be read as chidudin. Not that Yitro felt joy, but rather Yitro felt prickles, as we say, pins and needles, all over his body in hearing the story. Because according to Talmud, something about the story Yitro heard, it created an internal kind of conflict, a physical response, because it made Yitro see his life. The story made Yitro see his whole life in an entirely different way. In other words, there was something so powerful and treasured in what was called out of him by that story. In that moment, he knew and he was compelled. Everything in his life would now be understood and organized around that story he had just heard. All the things he had worked for, the little statuses, the old prizes, the money, the ego, the clever distractions, the protective alliances, now they all looked like idols to him. They were exposed as insignificant and trivial. Going into the wilderness would be just the start. He realized in that moment, we could say Yitro received Torah in that moment. He heard something and felt the voice in himself. He knew the song. It was unmistakable. It was irreducible. It was recognizable, and it was treasured, and his life would never be the same. It's possible that this kind of reorganizing and receiving and recognition is the kind of thing that has to happen again and again. We forget and remember, we remember and forget again and again. I had the pleasure of learning from the great teacher Melila Hellner. And since she is a Kabbalist, someone who is deeply spiritual, and someone who is very involved in activism and rights and local political campaigns, I asked her something like, does your spirituality, your religious mystical thought, does it provide you with strength for your work on the streets? I wanted to know, how do you use it? How do you channel it? How does it fuel the daily battles you have to fight? Very kindly, she let me know I had organized everything all backwards. She said something like, no, you don't understand. We want to be closer to the other world. We don't try to ground heaven. We don't try to apply God. Instead, we start with the realm of the soul, and that changes everything. It changes us here. It changes what might be. And if we forget this, soon we will be lost. When we receive Torah, right after we hear about seeing the voices, it says, Vayar am, vayanu'u v'ya'amdu merachok. When the people saw what was happening, they fell back and stood from afar. But it's possible that the verb vayanu'u, which I'm especially interested in because it's the same root as my name, it's possible that that verb here does not mean to fall back or wander or even move back, but rather, says Rashi and Sforno and Mechilta and Aviva Zornberg, it could mean something like a trembling or a quaking. Kenoa atse ya'ar mipnei ruach, like the way trees tremble from the wind in Isaiah. As if once the wind blows through the branches of the trees, The tree not only feels the ruach, the wind rushing by, but realizes in a flash of recognition, the ruach Elohim, the spirit of God, is very much within itself. It's within the tree. That is trees from their very composition, from the construction of their branches, from the makeup of their fine leaves. It's like in that moment, those trees understand we were created just this way to wrestle in the wind and make these generous sounds. And all that is happening on the outside, they realize all these generous sounds, they're also happening within. Maybe at Sinai, we were like those trees, moved by the wind, but also trembling from the power of the divinity we recognized inside. The voice, the song. And maybe this would surely mean more for our lives. And maybe at last, we were trembling from the familiarity of what we found. After all, these divine voices inside, somehow we knew they were ours. And these fragments of songs we heard, we knew we'd heard them somewhere before. Maybe it was at Sinai that we realized we were holy after all. And maybe we still are. You know, they say there are 10 songs. Song of Sea, the Song of Deborah, Song of the Psalms, of David and of Solomon. But one has yet to be sung. It'll happen in the future, they tell us, in the world to come. One day it will be sung without shame, without embarrassment, without a shred of self-consciousness, just a full-throated song. But I wonder, on this Shabbat Yitro, I wonder if this song already exists right here in the hearts of all of us who are here tonight. And I wonder if this song might be sung, not in the next world, but now.